All right. I think that is long enough to allow everyone to come in. If we have any late people, they can just join us afterwards. Thank you for joining us for Think Privacy, your cybersecurity checkup webinar. Today we'll have two presentations, or one that's combined with from the FOIP office and from IT. So it will have both privacy as well as cybersecurity information. We'll first go to Jennifer Sinclair with the FOIP office, but before that, can everyone see the presentation screen? Yes, good. Perfect. As I said, you can ask questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and we have a number of panelists who will be able to answer your questions either live or in the Q&A. So, to start out, we would like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising of the Siksika, the Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nations and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Take it away, Jennifer.
Thank you, Shannon. So as Shannon mentioned, we're going to start with the privacy portion, and then we're going to switch over to the cyber awareness. If you'd like to add your questions into the Q&A, I will start answering those as soon as my portion's over. Mark and I will also answer at the end of the presentation anything specific that we feel we need to elaborate on. So feel free to save your questions for then as well. Mark's going to be controlling the slides, so if Mark wants to go. What is privacy? We've basically divided the presentation, or my portion, to privacy, your personal privacy, and then privacy and the University of Calgary. The reason we've divided it out into two is that privacy is approached a little bit differently, and I want to be sure that we give you tips for how you can be cyber secure both in your personal life and your professional life. What your personal life and professional life do share, though, is an overriding principle. In privacy legislation, doesn't matter if it's the European Union, the Freedom of Information Act we're subject to at the university, or just general privacy, that overarching principle is that your personal information belongs to you, the individual, and you have a right to access it. So to start, we're going to look at your personal privacy. So the first question I want you to ask yourself is, are you being safe online? You might think, yes, absolutely, I'm being safe online. We're going to go through just a little bit of a checkup to ensure that you're being safe online. So, privacy checkup. Next slide, Mark. Google your name. What did you find? You won't have time to do that right now, but that's definitely something I would recommend you do later this week. Do it next week. Do it every few months. Are you comfortable with the information being public? Are you comfortable with the information that you can see when you Google your name? So here's what my search says. Facebook tells you I'm married. Instagram, I like to post pictures of my runs. So what part of the city I live in, where my runs start, where my runs stop, how long they approximately take me, what days of the week I favor. Snapchat would show my geolocation, what restaurants I like to eat at, what my habits are, again, what days of the week. UFC, if you Google my name, it shows you my job, my office location, my current benefits. It shows you my classification. You can assume I work Monday to Friday. On the surface, these pieces of information I'm sharing, they seem very low risk. The fact that I'm married, that's fine. The fact that I like to eat at certain restaurants, they all seem very low risk. The reason I say they're low risk is because every social media site doesn't include that same personal information. However, what if I use that same username for all my social media? What happens then? The issue is that I'm now providing dozens of pieces of personal information about myself in a very easy to harvest format. You can connect all these information. If you know my username, chances are I use that username on not only social media, I may use it on business communications. If I run a Etsy shop or a small business, I may use that as a login for different types of media, not only related to social media. Maybe I use that login for other sites, softwares that I use, data protection sites, banks where they ask you to create a username, your NMAX. What are the risks of this? So I see Mark's already got the slide up. What's the risk of having all this information connected to a single social media login? What's the risk of sharing all this information? The risks in their very basic format are in point form on the slide, but that information collected from social networks, it makes it much, much easier for attackers to make their phishing messages relevant and believable. It makes it so much easier for you to believe a phishing message, which Mark's going to elaborate on exactly what that is a little bit later, because you can go ahead and see, oh, they've got my name right. They know this about me. They know that about me. I wonder how they know this about me. Well, the reason they know that about you and the reason they can make those relatable is because they've been harvesting your data. Again, with hashtags. Hashtags are location specific. Geolocation. It can lead to more info collection that's not related to your social media. Data mining. Your information is being analyzed and sold. If you've ever logged into a social media site, or you've had a conversation around your house, or you've clicked on a link and you find your internet provider, every time you log in, you seem to be getting the same type of messages over and over and over again, or the same type of advertisements. That is not random. That is not a good guess by the corporations. For the most part, they've mined your data. Your information is being analyzed. It's being sold. It's targeted advertising. It's the marketing. That's why you're getting those specific sites pop up. And that works on the other side of things as well. If somebody in your house is looking at specific things, say your husband or wife is looking at jewelry, they're looking at these sites over and over and over again because they're looking for your Christmas present. It's possible, if they're on the same IP network, it's possible that your messages or your advertisements start to get targeted towards what they're looking at. So maybe you start seeing more and more rings, more and more pieces of jewelry pop up on yours. It's very much possible. The last one being internet. The internet is forever. The internet affects our jobs. The internet affects our relationships. In the privacy office, we receive dozens of complaints a year where individuals have consented. They have posted things on the internet. They then come to the privacy office and say, you know, I really had this posted when I was 20, when I was in my teens. I really don't want it up there anymore because I'm now completing a MBA and I'd like this to be gone forever. Unfortunately, that's not something we can involve ourselves in. That's also not something that's possible a lot of the times. That internet is forever. We can check with Google when it's related to the university specific, but a lot of times it's cached and it's there forever. So that's one of those inherent risks of social media. Which leads me to, what can I do? I've told you about all the risks of social media. What can you do? For starters, secure your digital footprint. If you have multiple social media accounts and you are sharing specific pieces of information, I'd recommend use a different username. Use a different login. Use a password generator. If you are using different softwares or new softwares, enable the privacy provisions that are built into the software. Shannon has built a great list at the very end of the presentation. We've also built a D2L course. Within that course, there are links. I would highly, highly suggest you look at that course that show you for your Twitter, your Instagram, your social Snapchat, your TikTok, what the privacy provisions are, how you can look at those privacy provisions, and what you can enable. For the most part, your social media is set to a default. When you log into your social media, when you sign up for an account, it says, here's what most people do, we're going to set that. You really need to look at that and look at, are you comfortable with the default settings? Are you comfortable with the default provisions and what you're sharing? If you're not, I would highly suggest you use those links to go through and figure out, how do I restrict what I'm seeing? Do I want certain groups of friends to only see certain information? Do I want only my friends to see certain information? Once you've set those privacy parameters, it's also a great idea to look at, possibly even before you sign up for a new project. What does the privacy policy say? Who has access to your data? Why do they have access to your data? Can they sell it? Again, am I comfortable with how my information is being stored and used? Is GPS built into the app or just when you're using the app? There was a story in the newspaper a few weeks ago. There was an Office of Privacy Commissioner decision relating to the Tim Hortons app. That's a global corporation. Users signed up to use the Tim Hortons app. There was, I believe, free donuts, rewards offered through the app. What happened was that app was running in the background the entire time it was stored on somebody's phone. The Privacy Commissioner had a look at that after a complaint and ultimately decided, you know what, it was okay that GPS was built into the app because that allowed users to find their closest Tim Hortons to order ahead. What was not okay, what users really needed to look at was, why was the app running in the background the entire time? And was that permitted? Ultimately, it was determined by the Privacy Commissioner federally that that was not permitted and that there was no reason for the corporation to have that running in the background. However, that's something that should have been looked at, or I would recommend looking at. Is the GPS running in the background the entire time? The reason I bring this to your attention is these are things the university also looks at when entering into agreements. I'm sure a few of you may have gone through what we call the software acquisition process. This is a process built into the university when individuals from all departments want to purchase new software or use new software. And when entering into agreements with vendors, the university, IT, privacy, legal, and supply chain perform a review on every one of those softwares and look at the privacy policy, the GPS, the IT configuration, your digital footprint, to ensure that the collection use of data is being proper. Which leads me to FOIP 101. If you'd like to go, I believe it's the next slide. Or one more slide. Perfect. We've talked about privacy in your personal life, but how does privacy work in the university context? FOIP. FOIP is the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. It's FOIP 101. I like to call it. We do have individualized sessions as well for FOIP 101. So if you are a group leader or a manager and you'd like your unit to have a specific training session outside of what we're offering currently today, feel free to get in touch with me. We do individualized units once to expand more on the university's iteration of FOIP. But essentially, as a brief summary, what is FOIP? FOIP is the provincial privacy legislation that we must comply to as a post-secondary institution. The Act originally came into effect in 1995. It was updated in 1999. The main issue with the FOIP Act, you can imagine, is it has not been updated since 1999. There's been slight amendments, but nothing substantial. You can imagine everything that's changed in the world, especially on the social media cyber awareness side. The Act speaks to microfiche. There is no mention of cloud providers, cell phones, text messages, or anything like that. However, although that's not mentioned, it doesn't mean we don't have to follow FOIP. What it means is we have to get a little bit more creative sometimes. As employees of the university, we all must comply with those requirements. What does FOIP do essentially, though? What is it? It's a piece of legislation. We know we must comply, but what is it? It governs the processing of access to information requests. It also governs the way we collect, use, and disclose personal information. So as an employee of the public body, you have two roles. You have your personal life, where the university collects information from you as an employee. So this might be your banking information to make a direct deposit for your paycheck, your license plate number in order for you to park in a specific parking lot. If you visit the wellness center for medical services, they may ask for your Alberta healthcare number. that is collected from individuals directly in order for the university to perform those. However, as an employee, there's also data that is collected from you that you're collecting from others. So if you're a professor or an instructor, you might be responsible for collecting information directly from students. If you're a student, the university may have you collecting information depending on what role you're in. The FOIP Act covers everything about the collection, use, and disclosure of personal information. If you want to go to the next slide, Mark. You'll hear over and over again by both myself and Mark, personal information. What is personal information? Essentially, the list you see in front of you, I won't go through expansively, but the list you see in front of you is exactly what personal information is. It's anything that could be used to identify you. Your name, address, educational record, financial data, criminal history, health information, etc. That is considered personal information. Interestingly enough, someone else's opinion of you is also your personal information. So in the, I'll elaborate on that after, I'll come back to that. One caveat we have is that although personal information belongs to the individual the information is about, the record may be in the custody or control of the university. The best way I can explain this is an example that we've come across a couple times in FOIP. We had an individual, a student, who provided transcripts to the university in, I'm going to make up a fictitious year, in 2015, as part of their application to an undergrad program. The student completed their undergraduate program at the university. In 2019, that same student was applying to a master's program outside of the university. They found something that worked for them and they wanted to apply for a master's program. The issue being, in the 4 years they completed their undergrad at the University of Calgary, they were unable to obtain transcripts from their home institution because the home institution ceased to exist. That's a very, very rare circumstances, in which case it came through privacy because the individual wanted the transcripts they had originally produced as part of their undergraduate application back. The university was not able to provide those back. Although the transcripts were the personal information to the individual, the record belonged to the university. In that case, what we went ahead and did was made a copy, and the registrar's office was able to certify that the copy was a true copy of the original record. Again, very, very unique situation, but just a real life example of how you can see where the line might be between the record with the personal information of the individual and the actual personal information of the individual, and how those intersect in a world of privacy and the university's legislation. So why does it matter what we know what personal information is? Mark, if you want to go to the next slide. The reason it matters what we know what personal information is because there are certain types of personal information that the university can go ahead and disclose. I will say, for a caveat, as an employee and as a student of the university, for the most part, your personal information being collected by the university is kept to the bare minimum. It is explicitly stated in our privacy legislation that any information being collected needs to be directly necessary for an operating program. What that means, and we have more examples of this on D2L, so again, I recommend you towards that course, but essentially what this means is if you are signed up for a course and you provide personal information, that personal information can only be used for the administration of that course. That personal information is not going to be marketed. It's not going to be sold. That personal information is not going to be used to refer you to a research study without your consent or anything of that nature. We take a very, very specific approach of, if you collected information from students, staff, faculty, for one purpose, the only way you can use that information is for that same purpose. Anything else requires consent. And consent would be formal consent. However, as you can see before you, keep in mind, in some cases, personal information may be disclosed without your consent. Again, very, very narrow approach to what can be disclosed. What you see in front of you is covered specifically in Section 4 of our privacy policy here at the university. In practice, what this means is if an individual was to call the registrar's office or call your faculty and say, I'd like to confirm so-and-so, and gives a list of information they'd like to confirm, the only information that's going to be confirmed and disclosed without your consent is this information you see in front of you. We will confirm your faculty or your degree program. If you've already convocated your degree that you were awarded, dates of registration, that's not your course load. That is not how many courses you took per semester. That is specifically, they were enrolled in September 2020 to July 2022. If you received a major award or personal information already in the public domain. Even with that being said, all of this will not be outright disclosed. The information that's being disclosed will differ depending on the context. So a student, a course instructor, a student advisor, the registrar, a student's parent or legal counsel, it is very specific to the use case of what will and will not be disclosed, but this specific information is what's outlined in our privacy policy. Along the same lines, what employee information can be disclosed? Employment status, business contact information, your title, your salary range, not your specific salary. However, caveat to that, salaries over 125,000 must be disclosed annually as part of the Alberta's Sunshine List. That's something that preempts FOIP. So while we particularly would not disclose that, that is something that's required by other legislation. Relevant educational qualifications, publications listed in a CVs or something of that nature, that's all information that would be disclosed and covered preemptively under our privacy policy. Again, it's going to depend on who's asking. We are not able to ask why they're asking, but who's asking, whether there's consent of the individual, whether we've come to you and said, do you consent to having this information shared? And in what form? If you want to go to the next slide, Mark. So you've heard about personal privacy, you've heard about the university privacy and the ways we work to protect you, collect, use, and disclose records. But how do we protect our records at the university? Those work records we create by virtue of our everyday work, by virtue of your life as a student. How do you protect those records? The university is subject to university retention rules. The university's answer is the Master Archival Records Retention Schedule. What that records retention schedule does is that it has two sides. There is the general retention rules and the specific retention rules. General retention rules cover everything, including transitory materials. These are emails that might go between departments or between individuals saying, for students, I'm covering questions 1 through 3 on this group assignment. Can somebody else cover 4 through 8? Those type of communications, they would be considered transitory. On the employee staff side, might be the same type of emails. It may also be communication saying, can you be available at this time for a meeting? No, I'm available half an hour later. Okay, let me send it, the Zoom invites, things like that. Those records are covered under transitory records in the university's retention schedule. And what that means is you can delete them without further review as soon as you feel that they have served their purpose. So you've set up those meetings, you've submitted the group assignment, you've got the mark back, you're very happy, you can go ahead and get rid of those records. You don't need to seek further permission. The other side of the university retention rules are specific retention rules. And this is going to be very specific to staff who are on the call, so I won't elaborate a whole bunch, but those specific retention rules outline the different types of records. There's 12 classes, I believe, that the university creates and provides individual retention of those records. It specifically says, if you are creating this record, the office of primary responsibility for that record and where that record should live is blank, and the record should be retained for a specific period of time. For example, consents. Photo consents, video consents, consents that are retained. The Office of Primary Responsibility is the individual unit that consent relates to. However, the overall retention of that record is 12 years. What that means in practice is you must keep it in the office it relates to, and you cannot delete that record for 12 years. Once 12 years has expired, you then go through the process and you can go ahead and delete that record. But you are not permitted to delete that at any time before that retention rule expires. I am happy to explain MARS. I'm happy to go into more detail on MARS after the session. Again, I can connect interested individuals with the archives over in Library and Cultural Services if you'd like to learn more about what rules apply to your unit. At the end of the day, though, staff, student, faculty, email is not the appropriate venue for long-term storage. You should not be using your email to store records long-term. If you are a staff member, SharePoint, OneDrive, desktop, appropriate venues for how you should store that information. As a student, you should be using the available tools to you. Again, not storing them in email, because when your relationship with the university ends, in both situations, you are not guaranteed that you keep the specific email that you have been using. Again, it's going to be very use case specific. In most situations you will, in some situations you won't. It's going to be very specific, but I caution individuals to not use that email for long-term storage of information, because I cannot guarantee that you will always have access to that information, which then starts a process of needing to seek those records from my office, if available. Mark, if you want to go to the last. I'm just going to wrap up the privacy side here and talk just a little bit about breaches. So breaches, what are they and how do they happen? Well, the biggest way that breaches happen is to do with that records retention schedule. Not deleting the records, not following our master archival records retention schedule, it leaves us vulnerable. It leaves the university vulnerable to breaches. So what are breaches? It's the unauthorized disclosure of information. Some of them are very minute and you enter the wrong person in the CC field. You send an email meant for somebody else to a person with a similar name. You add a dot into the email address. Those are small, very insignificant breaches. There are also breaches that happen, and Mark will give examples a little bit further down the road, but there's also breaches that happen that are very significant. These are breaches that might have bad actors, might be malicious in nature. In any event, no matter how small or insignificant the breach might be, let us know. And by us, I mean the FOIP office. Once we have an idea of what's happened, we'll figure out if a breach occurred, how serious it is, and how to proceed. Some of the breaches require immediate action, and my group works very, very closely with Mark's IT team, and we'll act and we'll follow up with the paperwork later. Some breaches come with a little bit of a reminder to be careful with email entry, filing a campus security report in the case of stolen equipment, police reports. In larger cases, it might be notification to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, where we need to make them aware that we've been subject of a breach. Breaches that incur under the Health Information Act, if you are a student or an employee who deal under the Health Information Act, the Research Ethics Board, so that would be research projects that involve principal investigators, or under the Conjoint Health, all should be reported to the FOIP office as well. that allows us to statistically track what's going on with those types of breaches, but again, allows us to take action and involve Mark's team and vice versa to figure out exactly how to resolve the breach. But one of the biggest ways we can limit our exposure to the breach, again, is records retention. Only keep what is necessary, at that point in time. And protect your digital identity. That's the biggest way that we can minimize our risk when it comes to breaches. Mark, if you go to the next slide, I believe it's
great. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. That was fantastic. Privacy is very important. One thing from a cybersecurity point of view on privacy is, all these technologies are out there to help us with our days and things like that. And we're not trying to discourage you from using them. We're trying to inform you and make you aware of things that you can do to protect your privacy or protect your identity better while you're using them, so you can enjoy them, because you want grandma there for the kids' birthdays, and you want to use your camera and do whatever you want with it and those kinds of things. So that was fantastic. So today I'm going to be going over the top 10 cybersecurity tips and a couple attacks we've been seeing, and I'm going to talk about some specific attacks that have happened with students, because we had a big focus on distance learning, so students in other countries and English as a second language students. And we always focus on employees and staff and researchers too. But the last webinar, we did a big focus on researchers and how you stay secure at home. And you can access those ones, and maybe Shannon can supply the link to the last webinar, and people can look in there and you can see how to stay secure at home. But I'm going to run you through our university's top 10 cybersecurity tips, and we developed these between research computing services and IT and the cybersecurity office. And we also talked to the academic cybersecurity professors on some of these to come up with these top 10. And so we'll get into it here. So last year, we provided a survey out to people, a cybersecurity survey, and maybe some of you filled it out. It went out to both students and faculty, staff, and researchers. And so one of the big things in there that came back, and I think almost probably just over 2,000 people responded saying, like, we want some free cybersecurity awareness training. We want some free privacy training for ourselves and for our staff. Or, as a student, how do I need to be more secure? How do I stay safe? And so education is a big piece of cybersecurity. Everybody's like, oh, cybersecurity is all about forensics and network monitoring networks and things like that. Guess what? None of that's really important if the end user or the people out there using our systems aren't aware of what the risks are and like how to stay safe and how to use it in an appropriate way. And so there's a bunch of courses listed on this page, and we're going to provide the slides to everybody who's attending here, so that you can click the links. And these are safe links, don't worry about that. These are going to be safe links that we send you, and it's going to be in a nice PDF form from a known email address. But the FOIP general awareness, please take that, and that's going to run you through a whole bunch of information on the FOIP Act and how to use FOIP and MARS at the university. And for cybersecurity awareness training, phishing, one of our biggest threat vectors at the university is human beings at a workstation clicking a link they shouldn't, and something bad coming down, or giving information we shouldn't have given. And then for researchers, we have 2 cybersecurity research focused courses, and those are actually from the body called ICED, which is one of the research bodies that provides grants and things like that to researchers. And so those are actually the approved ones for it, and you can take that, and that'll meet your requirement for Counsel, from what I understand. Now, software development, for those software developers out there that are employees, and I know there's a lot of students on the call today, so I don't think this is available to you yet. But you can go there if you're staff and you're developing web pages or software for us. You can take the OWASP top 10. It's kind of like the top 10 how to develop software and web pages securely. And then the new course this year is for staff, students, researchers, everybody, but mostly students kind of going to D2L. And that's why we built this one, so that students can go in there and learn about privacy and cybersecurity. And you can go to D2L, you can register yourself. We're going to have a how-to link on how to register that'll be shared with you at the end. And we want you to take those courses. And we listened, we heard, and we've delivered something for everybody who kind of responded to that cybersecurity survey. And I appreciate everybody who did. So number 2 is kind of take backups of your data. Without backups of your data, when something happens, it's gone. So it could be your photos, it could be your research papers, it could be your grad studies papers, or, it could be videos that you want to keep. It could be anything. Now, using IT equipment, if you're using IT equipment at the University of Calgary and your staff, and you're storing it on, your team site, or in your drive, or in your OneDrive, or your shared drive, if you use that as a department, all of that's backed up for you. But if you have personal stuff, make sure, or if you're a researcher and you're working on your own equipment, make sure you talk to Research Computing Services. They can help you out with other backup services, or you can store it on an encrypted USB stick or on an encrypted drive. And the reason why we want to specify encryption is because those are devices that people can walk away with. And if it's encrypted, there is a good chance they won't ever get into it, and it'll just be too difficult, and they'll throw it in the garbage or whatever. But you want to make sure you encrypt your backups. And most of the vendors out there that give you USB sticks or sell you external hard drives today, it comes with it, and you plug it in and it says, hey, do you want to turn on encryption? The answer is yes. And so you want to make sure you do that for all your devices, including computers, mobile devices, so your phones, your tablets, things like that. You can turn on encryption. Now, for iPhones, for example, like if you turn on the PIN number to get into your phone, or the Face ID or the fingerprint, that automatically turns on encryption on your device. Now, Androids, I believe it's the same, but I should have researched that before. I can't remember right now. So next, number 3, make sure you have good passwords. You hear this all the time. You don't want to reuse passwords. You want to have strong passwords. You want to make sure you're using different passwords on different devices and sites. It's kind of a pain, because it's like, God, how do I remember all of these things? And so we highly recommend that you use a password manager. So there's a whole bunch out there. There's 1Password and LastPass and, Key Vault, and there's a bunch of them out there. We don't have a recommendation for which one to use. Really, you got to research it and choose the one that's right for you, whether you pay for it or you want a free one, or those kinds of things. That's totally up to you. Now, the Canadian Centre of Cybersecurity, they suggest to use passphrases. So what a passphrase is it's kind of like 4 random words and 15 characters in length, and words that are meaningful to you that would never be put into a sentence in some readable fashion. And, you can add in special characters and numbers and stuff like that to make you feel more comfortable. But as long as you have kind of a mix of words and you're over that 10 to 15 character length, you got a pretty good password, unless it's like puppies. So, don't use puppies for your password. That's not a good idea. Or flowers, or Calgary. Things like that might not be a great idea. All right. So number 4, update and patch your devices. These are the things that have all your personal information on them, and you're doing your work on them. And unfortunately, threat actors, there's these things called vulnerabilities in operating systems and the software you use, and threat actors use and leverage those vulnerabilities to get on your device. And if you patch your device, it's less likely for them to get in there using one of those known vulnerabilities that are out there. So we highly recommend you keep your operating system, your web browser, your applications that you use on your devices up to date. And now, again, if you're using an IT managed device, we do that for you at the University of Calgary. But if it's your personal device or your personal research device, you want to make sure that you turn automatic updates on your phone. The iPhones and Apple, they just released what's called a 0-day. So 0-day is kind of something that's being exploited by threat actors, but there was no patch for it previously. And so the companies rush, and they get a patch out for it, and they released it. And one of those just came out for iPhone. So you have an iPhone, make sure you go and update your iPhone. It's very important, because bad things can happen if you don't, if somebody leverages that vulnerability. But it goes for your Mac OS, goes for your Chromebook, it goes for your Windows PC. Go and turn on those automatic updates. So in Windows, it's under settings, and you go to updates and just say, turn on automatic updates. And for Mac OS, I believe it's under the little apple in the top left, and you go to software updates and about my computer and turn it on there. So you want to make sure you do that. And those of you that have Mac OS for Calgary devices, we prompt you and say, hey, we want to install your updates. Make sure you say, okay, because you want to make sure. But it's not just those devices. It can also be your external hard drives, your storage devices. We have a lot of researchers out there that use a device called QNAP. It's a known storage device. There's lots of vulnerabilities out there for that. You want to patch that. And your TV at home, your dishwasher, your refrigerator, you don't want somebody shutting off your refrigerator. I've heard of a few stories at a few conferences of, black mold being in the fridge when they came home from vacation, but the fridge was still plugged in, but then they found somebody shut it off on them. These are real world stories that happen. So yeah, you want to make sure you set all those device automatic updates. And for all of them, if you just go into the configuration and settings, you can find updates and just turn on automatic updates. Most vendors do it for you now, but it's still good to double check. So be aware of who's accessing your systems. So lots of times when threat actors get in, they'll create an account for themselves, and then they escalate what's called escalation of privilege. So they'll turn it into a God account or an admin account on your workstation and or in your applications that you manage. And you want to make sure that you're reviewing those accounts regularly. And if there's any in there that you don't know or know why there's there, shut them off. And then you probably want to run a virus scan to make sure that you don't have any viruses or malware or spyware on your machine or ransomware or worst case. Very important. And make sure you're using the Calgary approved remote access for faculty and staff. Now, students can use this as well if they need to engage with their labs and researchers. And so you can find that on our IT ServiceNow site for the KB for how to do remote access appropriately. And it'll be in a bunch of, usable links that we'll share at the end. Big privacy. Jennifer just did a great job about talking about this. So, you want to engage IT or research computing services for when you're working with different data classifications, because we have a data classification model here at the university, and it's 1 through 4, and 3 confidential, 4 restricted health information. If you're working with any of that information with a technology device, we want to make sure you're doing it in the right way. And Jennifer's team and my team are going to help you do that. And research computing services, they're a great bunch to work with researchers. If we have researchers on the call here, and make sure you interact with them, and they'll get you the right solution. And we talked about a breach. If a breach happens, notify FOIP, notify IT. We're going to talk to each other and help you out. Phishing emails, that never ends. You get the text message, you get the social media links and Facebook and Snapchat and all this, and you don't know who they are, or you do know who they are and their account's been hacked and they send you a link. Make sure you read the link and make sure it's a site that you're aware of. And it's actually something that somebody would share with you. And, it's not unsolicited. The attachments don't look funny. The person who's sending it to you, it looks like their name, but like a couple characters are missing and they've never used this email address. Might be something you want to think about, double think about, actually clicking that link or opening it. If the logon page it takes you to doesn't look right, don't enter your credentials and just exit out and, go to Google and search it and go to the right login page, or use your bookmark if you have a bookmark for your banking websites and things like that. And, these threat actors, they kind of prey on human behavior and, emotion, and they'll send you urgent requests and it's like, oh my God, maybe I should help them, or, ooh, wow, it sounds really urgent. Maybe I should do it. And, the answer is probably like, maybe not. Pick up the phone and call them or text them directly to see if it's them. And 9 times out of 10, if it's like, hey, give me your credit card or give me your personal information, it's probably not the person you think it is. And so that goes to, don't send any sensitive information over emails or text. It's never a good idea. And if you do get a phishing email, we really want you to report it. So you can report any phishing email by attaching it to another email or forwarding it to reportphishing@ucalgary.ca. And my cybersecurity operations team, Sean Murray's answering questions in the background here, and Ryan Wu, they're going to assess it and they're going to address it appropriately and contact you if they need to, or other people who might have been impacted by the same phish. So remember, it might not just be you. So you report it so that you help out yourself and everybody else at the organization. You can do that with your friends too. If somebody gets a hold of your account, you can email them and be like, hey, my account got it taken over. Don't click anything from me on this day, kind of thing. If your student account gets taken over. So be cyber safe while traveling. University of Calgary has a travel program for researchers and staff and grad students that go away to do learning. And we have a loaner device program that can help you out. And that's run by Janet Stein's risk management team here at the university. And IT supports that with providing safe devices to go to countries that maybe we don't want our regular devices to go into or information to go into. And that's a reality. And the risk team will help you understand kind of what's the risk level of the countries you're traveling to too. So get in touch with Janet's team. Other good hygiene tips. Make sure you know the life cycle of your devices and operating systems that you run. So your Mac OS, your Windows OS. If you're running Windows 7, you might want to upgrade. It's quite vulnerable. You want to make sure you do that. Turn off services that you don't use on devices and things like that. Only install trusted applications from trusted sources. So like use the Google App Store. Don't use the weird app store that somebody sends you a link to on your Android devices. Use the App Store for your iPhone and for the Apple Store. That's a trusted source for them. Make sure you have antivirus and anti-malware software protecting your operating systems, and turn your firewall on. So both of those things are really going to help you. And you can Google anti-malware software, and you can Google for how do I check if my firewall is turned on. And there's always really, really easy user-friendly links from My Bleeping Computer or PC Magazine and things like that are reputable sites that'll help you out. And if you want to check if your LinkedIn accounts or your Facebook accounts or whatever have been breached on their sites or somebody else's sites, your email address, you can go to that ihavebeenpwned.com. You type in your email address and it'll say your email has been compromised on these 6 sites in these years. And it's like, oh, I haven't changed my password since then. Maybe I should do that. And for the faculty, staff, and researchers on the call, please use IT services. We're here to help you. It's the best way to stay secure against cyber threat actors. We offer a bunch of services that support both the research and academic requirements, and it's really a sign of excellence now. It's not an inhibitor. And, you can talk to the FOIP office and the IT office, and we'll help with privacy impact assessments and threat risk assessments for your technology and let you know what the risk level is based on your data classification. And always report cyber incidents. You can do it through uService or through a ServiceNow ticket, and we'll help you out. And there's the link to research computing services for researchers. So one type of attack we've been seeing recently is multi-factor authentication attacks. Everybody's like, oh, turn on MFA, turn on MFA, you're safer. It is safer, that is true. But people are saying, threat actors are starting to get smart, and what they're doing is they're fatiguing users because they got their password from somewhere else, but they can't get into the person's account over here. So they start kind of like, remember Zoom bombing? It's called like MFA bombing or MFA fatigue. And so they keep on hitting you with authentication requests. If that's happening to you, go change your password, because it's probably something bad. And you want to make sure you address it appropriately. And it can happen over the phone too. It can be somebody calling you and being like, hey, approve this request, I'm sending it to you because I'm your IT. We're never going to do that at the University of Calgary, and I don't think very many companies out there would ever employ that practice. So since we're kind of focusing on students, I wanted to talk about some attacks that we've seen on students. Oh man, we only have 10 minutes left. So credential stuffing, that's where they're using account passwords and email addresses the same at other sites to get into others. So like use the same login for Facebook and Twitter. They use it to get in your Facebook account, and then they stuff it, which is when they use it to get into your Twitter account or your UCalgary account. And you want to avoid that. So you want to make sure we've seen that a lot with students, unfortunately. And that's where password managers come into play. So make sure you do that. So phishing and smishing. So smishing is like where you get the text message. Very prevalent right now. You're kind of getting a lot of phone calls from WestJet and from the CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, and emails from compromised student accounts. You're like, hey, that is Mark Slide. Well, wait a second. Why would he send me a link like that? And it's like, oh, that guy must be compromised. Offers of employment. We've had a lot of students been tricked into offers of employment and think they have a job, and it's very sad. Providing personal information for remote international employment, that does happen to our students here, and we've had some sad stories about that. So be wary of any employment offer or employment requests. Make sure you talk to them and verify they are a legit company. visa or immigration information, be careful sending that over email. We've had people tricked into sending their immigration information and their visa information over email, and it's to a threat actor, and that's unfortunate. Gift cards, man, it breaks my heart every time a student phones in and says, I bought these gift cards for my professor, for the PI that I'm working for, and they're out $2,500 to $5,000. I think the biggest one I've heard of was $5,000, and I hear them crying on the phone with my team, and it's very sad. So be very wary of gift cards. Verify with your superior, your boss, your manager, that they actually want you to buy gift cards on the phone. Ransomware. So that's where they encrypt your device and you don't have access to your information anymore, and they extort you or sextort you depending on kind of what information is on there. So strangers in person, we've had that on campus where they come in and they say, hey, I really need to turn in this assignment really fast. Can I use your login? Can I use your computer? And then they end up surfing something they shouldn't, inappropriate sites, and install something on the student's computer that they don't want. And we've had a researcher student who was researching, and she lost all her research because they encrypted her laptop, and it was very sad. Spyware. You want to make sure you run that anti-malware and antivirus software on your computer, because spyware gets on there. They can watch your camera. They can take your bank details while you type it in and your password. So make sure you're using those top 10 tips to help you out. And there was another institution where we were quite close in the post-secondary institution, and unfortunately, this person, they hijacked their camera and they were privy to, images and material that probably that person didn't want getting out there. And it was another sad story. But here's a bunch of useful links. And thanks for letting me talk today about cybersecurity. And hopefully you learned something. And we only got like 6 minutes left, so I hope we have some good questions. So I'll stop sharing and we'll take questions. And I believe there's been a lot in the background, but stay cyber safe. Educate yourself. Thank you. Is there any questions? Yes, the links will be shared with you. Yeah. Yeah, the links will be shared with you. So
there will be an email going out in a couple of days with all of the links, the slide deck, as well as a place to watch the recording. And there is other links that I posted in the chat that you can see right now if you don't want to wait for the email.
Okay. I'm personally using KeyPass on my password manager app. Could I share a list of recommended apps? So unfortunately, we can't recommend applications for people to use, but you can go, if you just Google top password applications, top password managers, and then you get PC Magazine's review of them. It'll give you kind of a chart of all the features you get and how much it costs for each, and just pick the one that's right features for you. But KeyPass is a great one. There's nothing wrong with KeyPass. It's very reputable, and no issues using that one. How do you check for where accounts are active on your devices? So if you go into settings and you go to users, I think on Windows devices, it's under settings, and then accounts is where it is. And in there, it'll show you all the accounts on your computers for a Windows device. Mac OS, I'm having a little stall on my Mac OS knowledge. But that's how you do it. And if there's anything in there that looks weird, disable it and scan your computer like we said. I get poked until students. Okay. LastPass is amazing. Oh, that's good. And attaching their CVs. I never clicked them, but is that a good stance? Sorry, Meadow, I don't understand your question. Jennifer, do you understand Meadow's question?
Yes, I can jump in here. I think it's,
Okay.
I get potential students emailing and attaching their CVs and transcripts.
Okay.
From both the privacy and IT, that's absolutely the stance I think you would want to take is if it's coming from a Gmail account, it's coming from an account outside the university, you don't want to be clicking on what those attachments are. Although they're represented as a CV or a transcript, they could be, as Mark covered, they could be a phishing email, they could be something embedded in those records. From a privacy point of view, I would also say you are fully in line to respond back and just say, this is not the appropriate venue to receive those types of communications, because it also provides a risk to the individual who is sending those records to you, that they're sharing their personal information with you.
Great. Is there a VPN company you'd recommend for personal devices? Yeah, so again, like if you search for personal VPNs, unfortunately, we can't recommend ones. But if you search for personal VPNs, there's lots out there like Private Internet Access, CyberGhost, Surfshark, Private VPN, NordVPN. You know, there's lots out there that you can use. PC Magazine has a really good list of ones that'll give you the details. If you just Google PC Magazine and top VPN services for 2022, and it'll give you a really good overview in there. And I see a lot of the ones I listed off are actually in that list. I was just looking. So with online banking, if I sign in with biometrics, is that considered a security risk? Biometrics is a good security method to get in. If your bank offers that, fantastic. You know, you use your fingerprint or the iris, everything, but you know, you got to be careful with kind of like how good and how many megapixels your pictures and things like that are on your social media, because sometimes they can capture that off of there now. But yes, 100% biometric, good way, password and then a biometric to get in.
I can jump in on the next question, Mark. So it's, how do I remove my information from the contracts directory at the university? The short answer is that's not an option at the moment. The reason being, when I covered originally on one of the first slides, your work location is considered public information. It's considered the type of personal information that is publicly shared. It could show up on a business card, etc. It's not something that the university, I should say, the university has all the contracts directory. Everybody is published in the contracts directly. We don't consider that personal information under FOIP. It is publicly available. With the caveat, if you are in a situation, and you're more than welcome to reach out to our office individually, where having that information publicly posted poses a threat to you, a concern to you, there are issues behind the scenes that you feel would make it so you have a different use case than other individuals, you're more than welcome to reach out to me directly, and we can go through that and see if there are different parameters or something we can put in place. There are individuals on campus who, you know, as a result of domestic violence or different things like that, where their location is not published, but it, as an overall approach from the university, we publish all work locations in the directory.
Good. For the anonymous attendee, you can put disclosures on there on your email if you want, and so that people know, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. Would the university ever considering a particular password manager given the importance? Yeah. So some universities out there, they offer password managers to their faculty and staff, and yeah, definitely, we'd consider it. You know, it's one of those things where you got to build a roadmap and have an organizational change management plan for it, but it's definitely on my mind. So that's a good question. Calgary's OneDrive is generally considered, yes, Calgary's OneDrive is considered secure and private, but it differ from your personal cloud storage account. Yes. So the Calgary OneDrive is kind of, you know, IT manages that for you, and we make sure that we have account monitoring and making sure you have a strong password, making sure you have multi-factor authentication in front of that. And so yes, I would consider your Calgary OneDrive safe and secure. And for your personal one, make sure you go through your settings, make sure you have a good password, make sure you turn on multi-factor authentication, look at who you're sharing things with. You know, because sometimes you share things publicly by accident with online sharing and collaboration tools. So it's always a good idea with your sharing and collaboration to go through and look at who you shared what with. And you can do that in the OneDrive interface and in the Microsoft Teams interface. Just Google how to do that, and Microsoft will give you a nice how-to article on it. But I think we're at time. But are there shared drives considered secure as well? Yes. Yes, shared drives are in the University of Calgary are considered secure. Yeah. Right now they're good for up to level 1, level 2, and level 2 data. And then we try to put level 3, level 4 into SharePoint or Microsoft OneDrive. So yeah, they'd all be considered secure and backed up. Yeah. But thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate your
Patrick,
participation.
Sorry, before we stop, sorry to interrupt you here, but we do have a raised hand. Tammy?
Oh, okay.
Not sure if Tammy.
Go ahead, Tammy.
Sure.
Hey, hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just kind of talking or listening to you guys, but also I'm multitasking. So sorry if I didn't hear what you had said. So at the beginning of your presentation, you had mentioned fingerprints, right? I'm assuming that is biometrics, correct? Yes.
It is, yes.
So that's a security risk, hey?
It is a collection of biometric, depending on how it's being used in this specific use case, but it is considered personal information.
Okay, so this is actually coming up quite a bit on apps that I use, like for online banking, for instance. That's a huge one. I use biometrics because I hate having to remember a password. So thoughts?
I think it's totally okay to use biometrics for that. So you're talking about like on your iPhone, it says like,
Yeah.
you know, use the Face ID or use your thumbprint or your fingerprint to get in. Yeah, no, I'd say that's appropriate. That's fine. You know, Apple keeps that secure for you, and
Perfect.
that's a good
One less password.
use. That's a good use of biometrics. I think.
Okay,
And
wonderful. Thanks for
yeah.
answering my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And yeah, again, thank you everybody for coming and participating. And I think we said 180 participants at the top, maybe 181 at the top. So it's a great turnout. I'm glad people are more privacy aware and cybersecurity aware and educated. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and take care and see you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.